On Sabbath afternoon, the Sabbath following Thanksgiving, that my brother and I and mother and father hitched old Nellie and Sugar, our little mule, to the wagon, drove through the woods down to where Uncle John and Aunt Effie lived. It was about 2 miles through the woods, and there had been just a little bit of snow. Enough so that it left a few horse tracks in the snow and occasionally where the wagon had rolled through. We visited that afternoon, that Sabbath day, following Thanksgiving, and it had a wonderful time together. Uncle John, Aunt Effie, and their children, our cousins. It was getting about time to head back home, and we heard their dogs bark, making a lot of noise as if something were coming, someone or something. And we children all rushed outside, and we saw a man coming down the road. He had a little stick over his shoulder, and on the end of that stick was a bundle about that big. He was whiskery. He was dirty. He was wearing a pair of low Oxfords. And as he came up to where we were standing, almost aghast as we observed him, he said, "Could I have something to eat?" I don't know how long it took us children to gain our composure, and with a chorus we all said, "Of course." We brought him on up to Uncle John and Aunt Effie's house, and we said, "This man's hungry. Would you get him something to eat?" And so while Aunt Effie was preparing him something to eat, we hitched our team to the wagon and went on home. It was quite cool that night in southern Missouri. And Sabbath evening, as we sat around and ate some popcorn and some apples, we wondered where that bum was spending the night. Sunday morning was a beautiful morning. The sun came up. The snow was melting. We were doing some work around the barn, and Mother was busy in the house, and our dogs barked. And we looked down that little trail that led to our house through the woods, and there came the same man with his little stick and his little bundle. And when he approached us, he asked the same question: "Could I have something to eat?" Father had come out and said, "Of course," and he called back into the house and he said, "Elsie," that's my mother, "fix this man something to eat." And so Father started asking him some questions. Where he had come from, where he was going. And he said, "I'm on my way to Hillard." Now, Hillard is a one-store town about 10 miles from our home, that back in the days when people hacked ties and the sawmills were in that country, it was a booming little tie town. But today, no one hears of Hillard. The trains never stop. But this man was on his way to Hillard to catch the railroad track and walk to St. Louis, 150 miles. As he stood and Father questioned him and he answered the questions, it was very obvious that he was very cold. He almost shook as he talked. And Father said, "Would you like to come in and sit by the fire and get warm?" And I think those must have been the sweetest words that man had heard for days. And as he came in, we had sitting out in the center of our home the stove, a little tin king heater. And if any of you have lived back in the bushland and far enough back, you know what I'm talking about. A little tin stove. And I'll tell you, you could put the wood into it and open the draft, and that stove would literally dance. It would just move as it made the heat. And this man just got right up a straddle of the stove and soaked in the heat. Finally, Mother said that she had something for him to eat, and we took him into the kitchen. The whole family went along, but it didn't bother him. Mother had cooked 6 eggs. She had the toaster on the table, and she had a loaf of Kroger bread. And we had bought a lot of Kroger bread in those days. They had good bread, and it was 1.5 pound loaf, a long loaf. Mother had about a quart of blackberries on the table, and the man started eating. He ate the 6 eggs. He ate the whole loaf of bread. He ate the quart of blackberries. And he wasn't done. So I ran out to the cellar and I got another quart of blackberries. And for dessert, he finished up that quart and drank 6 cups of Posta. We took him back in by the fire, and Father talked to him a little more, and he had on just a light suit coat. And these Oxfords that were just soaked through and through from walking in the snow. Father said, you know, I think we have some overshoes that the boys have outgrown. Could we fix you up something so your feet wouldn't get wet? And he said, I'd be most grateful. So I went out to the shop where we had thrown away the shoes. We had stuck a pitchfork through them, and Father patched the overshoes. And he tried to pull them on over his wet shoes, and very fortunately they wouldn't go. Father said, why don't you just take your shoes off? We'll get you some heavy wool socks and just put your feet down into the boots, the overshoes. And you know, he ran his hand down into those nice dry overshoes. Oh, he said that would be so wonderful. When he took his shoes off, the socks came off with them. We opened the lid on the Little King heater and deposited both shoes there. Mother got him 2 or 3 pairs of socks, and he pulled these on, and he slipped his feet down into those dry overshoes. We gave him an old coat that was nice and warm, a stocking cap, a bright red one that we had. Mother fixed him up a bag of apples, some popcorn balls, some candy, a few sandwiches. My brother and I took him back through the woods to a road that would lead him to Hillard. He thanked us over and over again. And he says, you know, what you folks have done for me is the nicest Thanksgiving I've ever had. We've never heard of him since. We asked many of the neighbors that lived over in the area of Hillard if a bum came by. No one had ever seen him. We don't know whatever happened or whatever became of him. But I'll tell you, it's a Thanksgiving that I too shall never forget. Because, you know, boys and girls, Thanksgiving has that little word giving in it as well. And let's never forget to give at Thanksgiving time.